Elliot Ness, Al Capone, yes, the Untouchables. No doubt your head now full of images of television shows and cinema. They are also, though, all linked to, well, a rather strange period in US history: Prohibition. It was in the so-called Roaring Twenties, the economy booming, advertising driving mass consumption. Jazz was becoming the music of America. But parallel to the profound change in society, a counter-movement calling for a return to more traditional morals and values. As early as the middle of the 19th century, 13 states had already become dry states, where alcohol was banned. And in January 1920, a new amendment to the Constitution, the 18th, came into force, prohibiting the manufacture, transportation, sale and importation of any alcoholic beverage. The aim, of course, was to reduce consumption, which had been huge since the days of the Wild West. What it really led to, though, was the creation of tens of thousands of speakeasies across the country, fueling organised crime. In 1933, in an America weakened by the economic crisis, the 18th Amendment was finally abolished. Some areas, though, remain alcohol-free today or have severe restrictions on its sale. So 90 years after its abolition, Prohibition still leaves its mark across the US. Well, Fanny Allard and Fraser Jackson revisit Prohibition for France 24.
Somewhere in Kentucky, at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains, is a clandestine distillery.
Let me show you something before you get started.
This is Jacob, not his real name. He wished to remain anonymous, as distilling your own brandy is strictly forbidden in the United States.
This was a doubler that belonged to my great uncle. Now he was a shiner.
Moonshine is the infamous alcohol made from corn made by the people who live in this mountainous region.
My dad did it, his dad did it, their dad. So I know that far back that it was done, from what the family, have told us.
This know-how, handed down from generation to generation, became vital during Prohibition, the 13-year period during which it was forbidden to sell, manufacture or transport alcohol in the United States.
Whenever the Prohibition, they were looking for it, they could hear it and the smell, because as it's working, it will bubble, it will gurgle, and you can hear it when it's quiet. My grandfather, he was younger. He had 2 barrels, and him and my grandmother at the time, they lived in a small cabin. And the barrels were working when I say that, but he and my grandmother were working too. They were at the creek cutting wood, and he said that the revenue guy could actually come up and ask him, said, did he know of a moonshiner that lived in the area? My grandpa said, a moonshiner? Said, no, I don't know of a moonshiner. He said, but if they would have come up to the cabin, he said they would have heard it, a gurgling.
To make moonshine, you need corn, sugar, yeast, lots of water, and above all, patience. Once the mixture is ready, it must ferment for 2 weeks before being distilled.
All right, she's all stirred in.
Moonshine made its name during Prohibition, but the practice dates back to the 17th century. Farmers used the surplus seeds from their harvest to make alcohol and market it. And to avoid sales tax, hillbillies started distilling by moonlight, hence the name moonshine.
Something that they brought with them from the old country to here. They moved from over on the coast, just kept coming west. And, Prohibition just come along, and they said, well, we don't want it going on anymore. And it was here before that, and it lasted after that. The Prohibition was somebody else coming along and wanting to tell somebody else what they should and shouldn't, or could and couldn't do.
Prohibition marks the advent of organized crime. In no time at all, bootlegging became one of the country's most dangerous and lucrative industries. Chicago was the hub of the smuggling trade, an era that made the town famous, still attracting tourists today.
Welcome to Chicago Prohibition Tours. Again, my name's Jonathan. I'm one of the owners and founders of the tour. So you guys are in good hands today, I think.
Jonathan Porter has been a historian and guide for 12 years and knows every nook and cranny of Chicago's secret speakeasies.
How do you find a speakeasy? Well, much like a brothel has a red light out front, I'm told, a speakeasy has a green light, a green door, green piece of stained glass, green signage of some kind. And I know what you may be thinking, so hold on. All the drinking's on the first floor, and a green whatever outside means this is a speakeasy. How in the hell is that even a little bit secret? How do the cops not know that that's there? Of course the cops knew that it was there. In many cases, they were incredibly well paid not to care.
At the time, Chicago had between 10 to 20,000 speakeasies, the vast majority of which were run by the Irish and Italian mafia. It was the gangster era, when the names of Bugs Moran, John Dillinger, and above all, Al Capone reigned supreme.
This was an Al Capone-controlled location. Capone's made a deal with these guys. All right, you're going to allow us to use your space? Fantastic. Here's what we provide. We provide the booze. We provide the gaming. We provide the entertainment. We provide the protection. At some point, you're going to get raided. Keep your mouth shut. We will pay your fines. You got to go away for a little while. You got family. We will make sure that your family is well provided for. The amount of money that you stand to make is going to be well worth the risk that you're going to take on.
Their task was
Al Capone and his gang, the Chicago outfit, amassed fortunes during Prohibition. In 1927, the U.S. Attorney's Office estimated the organization's sales at $105 million.
The reason that Chicago is so deeply linked to Prohibition is because it was the crossroads at the time, right? All the rail went through Chicago, all the roads went through Chicago. So basically, if you could get your booze to Chicago, you could get it out to the rest of the country.
Alcohol was particularly transported through tunnels. Chicago became America's crime capital.
It's crazy to think that in a place as big as this, they tried to ban alcohol when it is something that people enjoy.
Prohibition came into force in 1920, but it took 3 years before it was really enforced. The rich were somewhat spared, because while the law prohibited the sale and production of alcohol, it didn't prohibit its possession or consumption. It was therefore perfectly legal to drink wine from your own cellar or private club.
This is for the elite of Chicago. The men that are members here make the rules. Nobody's coming in here to find out where they got their booze from. And then the opulence of this place. I'm pointing it out not just because it's beautiful, but to illustrate the vast difference between how the general public, or how the wealthy rather, could drink and how the general public had to go to some basement, gangster-controlled, prostitute-ridden, which, if I'm being honest, sounds like a lot of fun. But my point is, if you had money during Prohibition, your life didn't change.
Illegal alcohol is sometimes cut with methanol or turpentine, leaving thousands of people blind or paralyzed, if not dead.
When you strictly prohibit something, you leave it in the hands of the criminals. And what they end up doing is making things less safe. So I'm not for the prohibition of anything because it does not work, but I am for common sense laws. And a lot of common sense laws came out of Prohibition, which did help the detrimental effects of alcohol.
These harmful effects were considerable at the beginning of the 20th century. At that time, there were about 300,000 saloons across the country. The average man drank 9.5 liters of liquor a year, the equivalent of 13 glasses a week. Alcoholism was commonplace, and with it, domestic violence. So it was women who were the first to campaign for Prohibition.
The money that the men were earning, they would use to go to the saloon and drink, and the women didn't have food and money for their babies and things like that. And the women would go and they would kneel down in the dirt and they would pray until the place closed down, the saloons closed down.
Bunny Galladora is president of the WCTU, the Christian Women's Moderation Union, a 150-year-old organization led by feminist Frances Willard.
Frances Willard, here's her picture over here. She worked on getting the women the right to vote, which was very controversial in the WCTU. But she presented it in a way that if we had the vote, we could bring in Prohibition.
The union still has representatives in 28 states whose convictions endure.
We believe in total abstinence. We believe in abstinence from all things that are harmful. Our bodies are the temple of God, and we want to honor them with good health.
In particular, Bunny campaigned to preserve Maryland's dry counties, those counties where the local government totally or partially bans the sale of alcohol.
These are some pictures of one of our rallies to keep Damascus dry. The past time, Damascus has grown quite a bit, and there were a lot of new voters from out of town, and so it did unfortunately go wet.
After 1933 and the end of national prohibition, the question of alcohol regulation was left to the states, some of which authorized local courts to rule on the matter. Maryland has no dry counties today, but the one where Bunny lives operates under what's called a control model.
Our alcohol stores, our liquor stores, are run by Montgomery County government, and they are the wholesale distributors for all of the alcohol sales in Montgomery County. That includes our beer and wine, our hard liquors.
Alcohol, therefore, is only sold in dedicated stores, not in supermarkets.
You can see here that they sell all kinds of beverages are available, both sides of the aisle. They have a big, huge assortment, but there's no alcohol for sale in this store. This is a giant grocery store, and our grocery stores don't sell alcohol. I think it's a very good thing. Keeps people that are alcoholic or maybe tempted. It's not right in front of their face.
Maybe not right in front of their face, but right next door. A liquor store is just 20 meters away.
Maybe it just makes it a little more inconvenient that you have to walk a few feet.
A legislative quirk that might be considered a little hypocritical, and that sometimes leads to funny situations. In Tennessee, Moore County is dry, yet it's home to the oldest and most iconic distillery in the United States, Jack Daniel's, where Chris Fletcher is the master distiller.
You cannot buy wine or distilled spirits by the drink in a bar or a restaurant. And in fact, there's only one place that you can buy it by a bottle, and that's in our own gift shop here on distillery property. The only reason we can sell it is because it's on distillery property and we make it here, so the state allows us to sell it. Other than that, there is no spirits sold in our whole county. I know that sounds really bad, but you can drive any direction that you want to go and the next town is wet.
Jack Daniel's began making whiskey in 1866, but the distillery didn't survive Prohibition. It did not resume activity until 1938, 5 years after the end of the federal ban on the production and sale of alcohol.
This small brick building is the old revenuer's office. After Prohibition, it was required that a federal government agent was on site all 24/7. And so that stayed until the 1980s when they started relaxing those restrictions. And we still get audited by the federal government. They come in and see how much grain we buy and how much whiskey we make and how much taxes we pay on that whiskey.
The money generated by taxes on alcohol was the main reason for Franklin Roosevelt's repeal of Prohibition in 1933. At the time, the US was struggling to recover from the Great Depression and saw alcohol as a way of boosting states' revenues.
The federal excise tax that distilled spirits makers pay on distilled spirits is $13.50 for every 1 gallon. We make well over 100,000 gallons every single day here. So millions of gallons of whiskey we make a year. You can kind of do the math, and it does generate quite a bit of revenue for the federal government. So I'm at least hoping that there'll never be another prohibition here in the United States.
Today, you can buy alcohol almost anywhere in the United States. But that doesn't stop Jacob, the Kentucky moonshiner, from making his own moonshine every year.
You can buy it. You can go to the liquor store and you can buy a jar that says moonshine in it. I've never drank it. I don't know if it is or not. But, people say, well, I've tried it and I don't like it. But I really don't know what's in that jar. When this comes out on the other end, I'll know what's been put into it, what I'm putting into me.
Jacob is distilling his mixture of fermented corn in this artisanal alembic. The liquor is heated to 87 degrees in a steel vat, then evaporates into a condenser.
This here will be enough to set up on the shelf and do about any gathering that you wanted to get together and do. without the expense, a fraction of the expense. There we go. We're looking at probably about 21, 22 gallon in there right now. We should end up with 10, 11 when we're done. 11 gallons should take care of the crowd.
Moonshine is a very American symbol of independence. It's Jacob's way of telling the government that it can't take away his freedom.
130. That's good. Off to the jar and down the hatch. It's done. There is quite a bit of freedom to it because it can't say, well, we've got it. If you want it, you're going to pay for it. No, we don't need it that bad. You know, it's just, we'll go get it somewhere else. I think you have to have a certain amount of pride in it just to be part of that.
Prohibition was arguably the most unpopular law in force in the United States, and although it created a black market, it also helped to reduce alcohol consumption and related illnesses. Alcohol kills 140,000 people a year in the US, more than fentanyl.
Fanny Allard and Fraser Jackson revisiting Prohibition for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition. You'll find it, of course, on our website and all the previous editions as well at france24.com. There's more news coming up in just a moment. Thanks for watching.